Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new webinar. How does bike sharing help cities to become more sustainable? We are today very happy to see such a large audience joining us. We had a lot of registrations, so we are very proud of that, and thank you for being here today. We have mainly cities and local authorities across Europe and even beyond. So thanks again for taking the time to be here. If you have any issues to hear me, please say it now in the chat, but I think it's fine. My name is Jean-Michel Boëz. I'm the International Development Director at 15. We are a leading French provider of bikes, e-bikes, stations, IT. So our bikes are all over Europe. We are the provider of Paris with the Velib public bike sharing scheme. We have other systems in France, Spain, Germany, in Helsinki, in Finland, and even further in Vancouver, etc. We are now doubling the number of participants after 30 seconds of speech, which is a pretty nice hi to the one who just joined us. This webinar today is brought to you by the bike sharing expert group of Cycling Industries Europe. For the one among us that do not know really who is and what is Cycling Industry Europe, we are the voice. Cycling Industries Europe is the voice of the cycling industries, promoting actively the sector in Europe and worldwide. So the CIE represents the leading companies and technology providers within the cycling industry, which are powering the mobility transition in Europe. So from manufacturing components to full bikes, e-bikes, cargo bikes, and very importantly, also developing and growing new business models such as bike sharing, bike leasing, even last mile deliveries, and digital services. We are members of the bike sharing expert group of the Cycling Industries Europe Association, and we aim at delivering significant studies of the benefits of bicycle industry. So for example, our latest success was to ensure the inclusion of bicycle share projects in the EU Social Impact Fund, right? So it was quite a victory for CIE. And we also commissioned the benchmarking report on the best European cities for bike share. This is also a document we can share. Next slide, please. So what we can say, so as cities also continue to face challenges related to urban mobility, pollution, public health, we see bike sharing as one, and it has emerged as one of the most promising solutions to help address these issues, right? So today, together, we'll explore how bike sharing, sorry, can you hear me? I'm sorry, I'm getting cut. Okay, it's back. We will explore how bike sharing can contribute to making cities healthier, more sustainable, and more livable. So during this session, you will hear from experienced professionals who will share their insights on how to maximize its impact and measure it. Each of them will share their unique perspectives and experiences to help us better understand the value of bike sharing in the context of urban sustainability. So just one thing before we dive in, a quick reminder to please keep your microphones muted during the presentation. If you have any questions, you have a chat, feel free to drop them there. And we will also address some of those questions during our Q&A sessions. Let me briefly introduce our first speaker, Marion Galan Alfonso, Head of Public Affairs at Donkey Republic. Marion, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jean-Michel. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're very excited for this webinar, and I'm going to start to kick it off with talking to you about two sides of the impact on society that bike sharing can have. And I'm not going to touch upon the environmental side of bike sharing. I think We're going to touch upon it in the next presentations. And I'm going to concentrate on health impact and social impact for the next minutes that we're together. A first note maybe before is that with the CIE, Cycling Industries Europe, organizing this webinar, we are working with researchers this year to provide a study all across Europe, all across different bike share schemes, different territories, cities, regions, and so on, to understand and to quantify the impact of bike sharing. So what you're going to see is a study that Donkey Republic made with a university, and we're going to do that for a longer time and for much more data points. So please stay tuned to learn more about our study at the end of the year. Maybe we can move on to next slide, please. Thank you. So what I wanted to show you is how we can calculate some health benefits of bike shared schemes, and how also, if you have one in your city, you can work with your provider to see how you can calculate it. First of all, it needs to be a collaborative research between scientists, and for us it was with the Dresden University, and the data from the company. And what we've been doing is we've been working with them since 2020 to develop a dynamic data model that is enhanced every year and refined to make sure we're the most accurate possible. And how do you calculate that? You take into account everything that is a positive point coming from a bike share trip. So you need to understand what a user would have used instead of a bike share or a shared bike. It could have been a bus trip, but it could also have been walking. So you need to have those data points. Also, it needs to incorporate also negative points, which is the risk of accident, for example, on bikes, or any negative impact. And obviously for bike sharing, it is very much positive impact, even though we take into account any negative insight. And what we found out is that for a pedal bike trip, that is slightly different for any bike trip, you have around 1.5 euros health benefits for around 2 kilometers, which doesn't sound that much. But when you calculate it by the number of trips made in your city, for example, you can see that it can amount to quite a lot of money saved in terms of health gains for your population. So for example, for Donkey in 2023, and that was up to 10 million euros that were saved for the different operations. And obviously, you can work directly with either the provider or the operator of the bike share scheme to understand in your city for that number of trips and given the type of user you have, how much have been saved. And this type of collaborative research has been done by different companies, of course, and you have also much more data you can get in terms of how much do you save in congestions, also how much do you save in CO2 emissions. So don't hesitate to ask me or any of the colleagues presenting today, because I think it's very interesting also for cities to help them reach their goals towards climate change and towards a healthier society. Now, if we can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. I wanted to touch upon something more local. I wanted to touch upon the social impact of bike sharing and how you can also see bike sharing systems in your city, which are usually a mode of public transport, as a way to also have a good social impact. The example I have here is one example of vélo partage in the canton of Geneva. We also have other examples in other cities, such as Antwerp region in Belgium. And that's how we can empower people through employment. How do we do that? In both operations, whether it was Antwerp or in Geneva, it was set up from the start, which is quite important, because then you set up the whole operation around collaborating with a local association that supports individuals who are facing challenges in accessing regular employment. And so in Geneva, we work with Genève, and the idea is to make sure that social service beneficiaries, but also asylum seekers, can get into the job market. And how do we do that? We make sure to select the right profile that would fit with a bike mechanic job or with a driver job. And we train them to be bike mechanics or drivers, depending on the competencies of the person. And how do we do that? We do this with what is called emploi de solidarité, which is solidarity employment. contracts that can go up to 3 years. But we always stop way before the 3 years. The idea is to foster stability, to foster sustainable employment for the person. So usually between 3 months to a year, the person is trained and can move on to a regular full-time contract. And I know sometimes it can sound like a bit optimistic, but we do see really good results. The team that we have in Geneva, the yearly team, we have 10 full-time employees. There's one manager, there's one person that used to work for Donkey Republic in another city, in another country. And the rest of the team, 8 members, have started with that program and have moved to regular full-time contract. So we can see that it's been working for the past 4 years, 4 years and a half, more exactly. And even one of those team members is now the city manager, managing the whole team of mechanics, although the part-timers during summer. And he started in the program being an asylum seeker, learning French through work, and also learning the skill through that training. So if you have any questions regarding that type of social work that can be done through bike sharing, we have other examples of working with social workshops for very simple tasks or for winter maintenance in other operations. Don't hesitate to ask in the Q&A. We'll have a small session later on, or to contact us at Donkey. Thank you, and I will leave the floor to the next speaker.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you, Marion. So we will now listen to Chiara Filippucci from Tier-Dott. She is the market development and sustainability manager. So Chiara, please.
Thanks, Jean-Michel. Thank you. Yes, I'm Chiara Filippucci. I'm a sustainability manager here at Tier-Dott. I'm working in the micromobility industry for a few years now, and I've joined the CIE as part of the expert group in sustainability and CSR about a year ago. So I'm very happy to bring today what it means at Tier-Dott to be thinking about sustainable long-term impact. All right, I see the slides a bit blurred, but I believe that's okay. So if we can move on to the next one, please. Okay, colors back, great. So taking a step back, Tier and Dott joined forces in 2024 to become the responsible micromobility partner, offering bikes and e-scooters, so at a multimodal level. Both companies were founded back in 2018 with sustainability at their core and have a joint mission to change mobility for good together. In terms of our sustainability vision, it means that we want to accelerate cities' sustainable mobility transition by providing solutions of shared mobility that are powered with environmentally and socially responsible operations. So if you move on to the next slide, you'll see how this is captured in our sustainability framework that defines impact along the 3 areas that we tackle as a company, meaning the impact we have on cities, on the environment, and on society. And having this framework in mind allows us to understand that this impact is multidimensional, and it keeps us focused on really what matters to meet city sustainable goal, but ultimately UN sustainable development goals. So today we'll focus on the left side of the slides, cities and environmental impact. If you can move on to the next slide, please. When we talk about city impact, it basically boils down to the fact that we want to get people to move on to more sustainable modes of transport. So not only getting people on bikes and scooters, but also to get them on public transport more and ultimately reduce car dependency from cities. In 2024, I'm also building on Marion's points mentioned earlier. In 2024, we have inquired our riders about their perfect. In 2024, we have inquired our riders about their most recent trip on bikes or on scooters, and we captured the trend about amplifying local public transport by knowing that about 40% of our rides were connecting with public transport, and a portion of those, about 20% of those, were indeed enabled by shared micromobility services. This means that at a global scale, our services in 2024 has enabled about 6 million of trips onto local public transport network, which is very impressive. And you see on the right, there's a picture about Milan, which is very self-explanatory. It really shows that scooters and bikes right end where public transport stations are, meaning that we can concretely amplifying the reach of these existing networks of mobility. Next slide, please. So going beyond the uptake of micromobility and public transport, we know that fueling the transition to a sustainable mobility results into wider community gains. Again, what Marion mentioned earlier, it really applies to the industry as a whole. Our users know that choose us because of time savings, and this ultimately means we reduce traffic and congestions. We make riders happier because they're traveling on an active and outdoor modes of transport, but ultimately benefit the wider community by reducing noise, pollution, CO2, and congestion overall. So really beyond just uptake of micromobility and sustainable modes of transport. If you go on to the next slide, I also wanted to emphasize today that for us, it's just as important how we deliver this impact to cities, meaning that we keep in mind the environmental impact, which is also, by the way, my area of expertise. In particular, what we mean by environmental impact is that we want to operate with minimal environmental emissions, and that's why we initially started by decreasing our operational environmental footprint through electric service fleet, renewable energy supply. But over the last about 18 months, we've actually been tackling the largest and hardest to influence the scope emissions share, which comes from manufacturing vehicles. So for those of you familiar with CO2 technical works, we're talking about scope 3 emissions, the largest emissions for our kind of service. And at Tier-Dott, we're bringing one of the most successful examples in terms of environmental initiatives internally, which is our vehicles refurbishment program, which is acting on proactive refurbishment of vehicles hardware, IoT modules, Li-ion batteries, motors, and key components to extend vehicle lifespan beyond 7 years, which has really been resulting in impressive gains in terms of hardware functionality and lifespan expectations. Not only increasing our internal capabilities, but also fueling the circularity economy, for example, partnering with Novo as our specialized partner for battery repairs. So this was really a key focus for us over the past year. So if we go back to the initial framework I mentioned, so cities, environment, and society, we want to keep maximizing the impact. We know it's positive on cities, while obviously keeping in mind that we want to minimize the environmental impact we could have on the planet. And again, being a responsible operator from a social standpoint. So that's all from us, a bit of a snapshot of what we intend impact to look like. If you move on to the next slide, you'll see there's a link to our sustainability report, which delves into the detail of a lot of the data figures I mentioned earlier. So back to you, Jean-Michel, if you want to.
Yes, thank you, Chiara. We'll make a short Q&A break for a few minutes. So I see we have some questions already in the chat box. So thank you for that. I don't know who could answer this question. It's quite interesting, and it also goes back to the business model, I suppose. We have a question from Sami in the chat. Sami is wondering, like in percentage, how many rides are done by tourists and how many like by the local people, the residents. So it's a quite interesting question. It also depends on the contract. The public, is it public funding? Is it privately owned system? So who wants to give a first answer? I see Chiara and Marion. I see Marion raising her hand. Marion, please go ahead.
Yes, I think maybe I can give some answers because we have both public contracts and we also operate as private operator in some cities. And Sami, it really depends on not only the type of contract, but also the type of city. We are operating in some cities in Europe where it's close to 100% local residents. They are not so much touristic cities. It's a public bike share system, so you usually have also a very affordable pricing. And we also operate in cities where we have sometimes 40% tourists, especially in summer. And where we also have a lot of locals, so a majority of locals, using memberships and so on. So it really depends on not only the type of contract, obviously. Also, I think the seasonality for all of us. And contrary to what you might think, I think even private operators are catering to locals or local residents. Otherwise, that would not work for the whole year in certain places. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Marion. Chiara, you wanted to add something because I saw you reacting, or I was wrong?
Yeah, just adding a figure to what Marion mentioned is that it's obviously the same for us. We have a key investment into local and frequent riders, and our figures of local residents go up to 90% in cities like Paris. So we really invest into local riders that use our services as a reliable commuting option, for example.
Thank you. We have a question from Mark Strong, which I can also partially answer. Hi, Mark. Mark is asking, how do providers ensure long-term quality of service, especially in longer contracts where there is less incentive to maintain cycles as the contract runs out? An example is Beryl in Brussels, where there is a combination of lower use because of the competition also with the free-floating e-bikes and older equipment needing more attention. If I may already give an answer on that before passing the word, the answer would be a combination of a nicely done contract with public tender requirements, right? So Velo and so many other contracts in Europe are quite old and were done in a way which wouldn't be done right now by major European cities. So it's a combination of a nicely written contract and public investment. So both, actually. Nicely written contract with reasonable KPIs in the long term and public budget. If you miss one of two aspects, you won't reach this goal. So I don't know if someone, we have 3 minutes left for this short Q&A sessions, if someone wants to react, or did I already summarize?
I think
Marion?
you summarized it really well. We are seeing the exact same thing. Basically, the contract needs to be thought ahead of time as how it will age in the future. And I think, Jean-Michel, what you mentioned is it can't happen without also the public input and the fact that you need to plan funding for also your system. So that, I think we can't stress that enough.
Yes. Okay, thanks, Marion. If there is no further question, there will be a final Q&A session at the end. So thanks, Marion and Chiara. We will now speak with Patrick from Beryl. Patrick, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. So yeah, I work for Beryl. We are a micro-mobility provider based in the UK. So I'll talk a bit about our experience in the UK, particularly with a kind of lean on social value of our bike share services. As you might see from this first intro slide here, we are a certified B Corp company. That means that we have to operate for a social and environmental good. So social value and its outputs and inputs are intrinsically based in our organization, and we try and output those into the services that we operate across the UK. If we could go to the next slide. Interestingly, I think, dare I say it, the UK could be quite progressive in the area of social value. More recently, the procurement law has, or it's just about to change in February, where it will change from awarding a contract to the most economically advantageous tender to the most advantageous tender. So what this means is that social value, a social value delivery plan, decarbonisation pledges, lack of 0 hour and contracts and input of living wage will all be given a far higher weighting. So it's actually embedding social value from the outset. We have to align with these principles if we're going to win these contracts. Another emerging part of social value in the UK is that there is a TOMS framework. Now, what this does is it attributes a value to those positive externalities that a bike share service can bring. So I've included here a kind of brief output from one of our services in the UK. So you can see local employment is valued quite highly, local spend. So if your supply chain is local, community support, volunteering hours. Luckily for bike share, car miles saved and carbon saved is also in there as a kind of metric that is measured. What this does is it gives us a a measurable output. So each of one of those has a value that we can attribute, and depending on how many hours or how many people we employ in those roles, we can actually output that to a measurable economic value. And you'll see across the bottom here some of the values that have output over the years. So the higher the value actually is kind of down to a longer term contract. Some of those contracts have just started, but it's been really useful for us to engage particularly local politicians that aren't perhaps motivated by cycling or sustainability, but they might be motivated by getting people into employment or the economic benefits of having people in a city. And bike share does employ quite a lot of people, so it does have quite a positive impact. So this has been a great way for us to sell bike share to the cities and get further investment in it. If we just go to the next slide, please. So there's obviously a balance in doing the right thing can often be doing the expensive thing, and how do we commercially balance that? And in some of the contracts, Jean-Michel was just talking about getting the contract right. We have seen examples where contracts are sometimes not aligned to some of the social value outputs that cities want to see. We've had a recent example where we've had a profit share of a city, we've had a social value commitment, and the social value commitment has meant that we're making less profit, and the authority is slightly aggrieved that we're not making as much profit as we thought we might, but equally, we could make more profit if we didn't deliver on social value. So those two things have to be balanced when you're looking at how to procure a micromobility service in the cities that you operate in. One area where we have, luckily, I won't say solved this problem, but definitely helped this problem, is with a sponsorship in Norwich, a city in the east of England. We're working with a national infrastructure provider, National Grid. The sponsorship has obviously funded, branding on the bikes, and there's a brand value to that. But equally, we have worked with National Grid to create an activation budget. So this is a real added value to National Grid, because we're not just putting their branding on our bikes, we're actually going out and undertaking different measures and different promotional events and getting bike share into the hands of people that might not otherwise be able to get onto our bikes via this new activation fund. And actually for them, that's it will depend on the sponsors and how they are motivated, but for them that's actually more valuable than having their brand out there on all of these bikes. So a couple of examples that I've included here. So work in Norwich. This is working with the local job centre. So the job centre in the UK takes unemployed people, finds jobs for them, helps put them into employment. A big barrier to keeping people in employment is their travel to and from that workplace. What we've done with the National Grid budget is given anyone that's given a job via the job centre free access to the bike share for 6 months, and then ongoing 50% discount funded by us post that point. So that's, that service has got a real high positive value to National Grid. In the bottom right hand corner, all libraries in Norwich now, if you cycle to or from them, there's a free journey based on our bikes can tell where they start and finish, so we offer free journeys to and from those libraries to get more and more people going to libraries. Libraries in the UK are much more of a kind of community centre and community value now, not just to pick up books, but again, positive externalities for National Grid and for us. In the bottom left hand corner, you'll see a kind of, this is a heat map of journeys. Right at the bottom left-hand corner, there's a big flurry of journeys. This is an area of Norwich that we couldn't support due to its kind of low propensity to bike share. What the National Grid funding allowed was making all journeys that start in that zone free for people that live there, so starting or ending. And what that meant is that because we used that fund, we actually had enough funding then to extend the service out to an area of low kind of cycling propensity, but actually offering the bike share for free, particularly e-bike share, really got people cycling in that zone in an area where they perhaps otherwise wouldn't. Yeah, that's kind of it. Yeah, so I guess hopefully you see that the UK is maybe taking a lead, and I think attributing those values to the social value approaches that we have has really helped us sell bike share to our cities and get more support, because they can see actually the added value that it has, other than just getting people onto bikes. Obviously funding is still an issue, but if you can find the right sponsor and sell them on those added value activations, then you've got a really good chance of having a much more varied approach to embedding social value in your services.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Patrick, for your input. And don't worry, we still love you guys in the UK.
Okay.
So we will now we will be speaking with Tejus Shankar from Lyft Urban Solutions. Tejus is the policy development manager. Please, Tejus, hi.
Hi, thank you so much, Jean-Michel. Can you all hear me? Yes, awesome. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. It's really exciting to see such a large and diverse group of people across the world and across Europe. A quick background on me. So I'm Tejus Shankar. I lead policy development and research for Lyft Urban Solutions. If you can go to the next slide. Many of you may have heard of PBSC since Lyft acquired PBSC more than 2 years ago, and together it's been an incredible and significant journey of growth. We're continuing to embrace our commitment to deliver world-class station-based micromobility solutions with the same team of experts, world-class products, and the same reliable, high-quality service. As you can see on this map here, we power 57 cities and 16 countries with shared micromobility solutions. And some of the programs you may have heard of include programs such as Bising in Barcelona, Santander Bikes in London, and City Bike, our flagship US program in New York City. And City Bike actually is the largest station-based bike share program outside of China. Last year in New York City, we had delivered over 40 million trips. And then also we operate in cities like Mexico City, where we were able to update the station's hardware and software and seen a tremendous growth in trips, 83% year-over-year growth in the past couple of years. But as you've seen on this diagram, a lot of the growth that we've really seen in the industry has really been driven by a preference of e-bikes. Riders really love e-bikes. And we've seen that consistently across many different cities. In Barcelona, 72% of Bising trips were taken on e-bike, despite there only being just over 50% of the fleet being e-bikes. In London, e-bikes account for 3 times more trips than pedal bikes. In Washington, DC in the US, we saw 169% growth in e-bike rides as we're starting to add more to our fleet. And in Madrid, they've decided to have a fully e-bike fleet. We had a 95% growth in rides and seen tremendous overall growth with the addition of electric bikes. And I wanted to do a little bit more of a deep dive into the BC MAD system in Madrid, particularly as we're really exploring station electrification. The value of having a station-based system is we really can focus on developing a charging network. And in Madrid, the city has really doubled down on that and have every single station in the system is a charging station. There's over 630 stations, nearly 8,000 e-bikes. And as a result of the charging stations, the system has been able to eliminate most battery swaps, which has enabled the system to reduce the vehicle miles traveled of the operations team. As a result of this as well, the city has really doubled down on the station-based system and enabled the BC MAD system to be an exclusive bike share provider. You can go to the next slide. So I wanted to focus a little bit more on impact, both on the fleet sustainability side and then also on the social impact side. So talking a little bit more about fleet design, our station-based bike remains a truly sustainable device. They've been on the street for more than 10 years in many of the markets because of a lot of the industry-leading sustainable engineering efforts that our team has put together. And they go through pretty significant in-house durability testing. These products are custom built to be on the streets and to be shared. Actually, a lot of times for shared bikes, we optimize on very different things than personal bikes. They need to be a lot more durable and ensure that they can be long lasting on the streets. And so they're designed in that way to ensure that. But beyond vehicle sustainability, we also want to ensure that during the end of life for vehicles, they're recycled in a sustainable way. So as we looked into that, we ensure that we're supportive of a circular economy. In particular, I wanted to highlight one example of battery recycling. In the United States, we work with a vendor named Redwood Materials. Redwood Materials is a battery recycling company, and they're able to recover 95% of key battery elements to supply raw materials back to battery manufacturers. This enables all of our batteries to be recycled in a more sustainable manner, and for these batteries to have continued use in the future. Going over to the right here in terms of how we think more about social impact and engagement, I wanted to talk a little bit. We run a report called the Lyft Multimodal Report, where we survey riders in our operated markets to get a better understanding of how they're using the system. In our 2024 Lyft Multimodal Report, our riders shared that 83% of them have used a bike or scooter to get to or from public transportation. And among our bike share members, 69% of them do not own a personal vehicle. So we really see how bike share is leading towards reducing car ownership and car usage. On top of that, we really tried to double down on an inclusive cycling culture. So as an operator, we work really closely with community groups to cultivate an inclusive cycling environment. In last year alone, we supported nearly 800 community events to get a better understanding of our riders and help support their needs so that they see bike share as a solution that works for them. On top of that, during a lot of these events and engagements, we help support and deliver a new membership experience for riders, particularly for members that may be living in affordable housing or receive some type of food stamp or accommodation. We provide a low-income membership program, which can be as low as $5 per year in some of our markets to support the growth of low-income ridership. As a case study, actually in my hometown in Chicago, we were able to really help to grow this program further, and working closely with the city, tripled the service area of the bike share system, Divvy, to cover the entire city. 75% of that growth was aligned with Chicago's health equity zones in the south and the west sides. And as a result, 42% of all of our stations in the Chicago system are located in low-income areas. We really want to enable a more diverse offering and diverse product offerings for our customers. And in the Chicago program and in others, we're really considering multiple device types to offer different solutions for riders. So under the same membership, they're able to take a bike and a scooter, and we're exploring a lot more around charging both bikes and scooters directly in the docks to ensure that that sustainable system that we talked about in Madrid is possible across all of our cities. And as we're thinking more about inclusive cycling, and I know Jean-Michel will talk a little bit more about this as well, in order to be the most inclusive transportation system, it requires public investment from cities. We really need this to be a true public-private partnership where cities are invested in growing ridership and seeing bike share as a true public transit solution. So really excited to see how that continues to grow. In many of our markets where there has been an investment in public funding, we've seen significant ridership growth. Thank you so much, and excited for the questions to come. Back to you, Jean-Michel.
Thank you very much, Tejus. Thanks a lot. Thank you to all the speakers. We have 16 to 18 minutes Q&A phase now. I would like to kindly ask our participants to ask the questions in the chat box. It would make my job right now much easier than trying to scroll up the conversation, which I will try to do anyway. I see a question from H. So hi, H. Regarding the mass integration or the integration of bike sharing within public transportation. So the question is like, how many schemes are fully connected to public transportation conglomerates? It's a very difficult question to answer. I don't know if anybody has the answer here, but I think we could try to. Maybe I could ask to Chiara. Chiara, remembering your Milan example, right, where you mentioned the full integration of your system within the public transportation app and system. This cooperation between the bike operator, the local transport authority, and the city, so this kind of triangle, is sometimes challenging, right? Any advice from your side, from your perspective, maybe to ensure a smooth cooperation within this triangle?
Yeah, thanks. It's an interesting question. It obviously, every city is different and has its own needs and peculiarities. And but there's an approach that I believe we can put forward as what we found successful in most of the occasions, which is to bring forward and first and foremost a collaborative approach before even thinking about what are the right technological assets needed to solve this solution. So obviously, it's very important to start from a collaboration of cities, operators of bike sharing systems, scooter sharing system, and local public transport. So first of all, aligning on the long-term goals, establishing clear communication, an iterative approach that really takes into account the feedback from this multi-stakeholder system. And that's even more important, we have realized, than having the right technological asset that will fit for all cities. So first of all, I believe the approach is really the key answer here. So having a collaborative approach before tech solution first approach. I think Patrick also raised his hands if you want to.
Yeah, thank you, Chiara. Tejus? You're in mute, Tejus. You raised your hand.
Oh, thanks, Jean-Michel. Yeah, just echoing a lot of what Chiara said. I think it's around developing the system early on in collaboration with city partners. And I think in a lot of cases, it's not a technology barrier. It's many times like a legal barrier, or trying to ensure that the right contract structures are in place to make that possible. Some of the ways that we've been trying to integrate with transit as an operator, we worked in terms of ensuring that there's smart integration with the transit card so that riders can unlock a bike using the transit card. And so there's ways that we're exploring that further, or ways that we're thinking about pairing trips to certain cards. Another aspect that we've really been looking at too is how to support transit during service disruptions. And for example, in Boston, in the United States, we had a program when one of the lines was shut down, there was an offering to provide a bike share membership to support that the overall system shortage with the transit system, and overall riders really started to use the system, and the ridership really grew along that line where there was that disruption. So these are like smaller tangential ways to think more about transit integration, but as we really know that riders are preferring to use bike share solutions to get to and from transit. So the more that we can explore how to ensure that process can come together, I think that'll be really valuable.
Thanks. Thank you, Tejus. I saw some questions regarding the docking stations, the absence of docking stations, the investment in infrastructure. So there won't be one correct answer given today, right? It's a complex question which depends on the contract duration, which requires or does not require investment on the infrastructure. It depends also on the final objective of the city or the authority. Do you want to maximize the impact with a cheap price for your citizens and with the systems which is available everywhere in the city, or do you want to spend a bit less money and being concentrated on some neighborhoods of the city? So or do you want also a short-term contract where it's not worth maybe investing too much in infrastructure? So it really depends on it's a political decision at the end. Do you want to have a long-term contract with a long-term investment and fully integrate also the system in public transportation? So it's a difficult question to answer, but it's a very interesting one. Give me 10 seconds. I'm scrolling down different sources of questions.
I was just going to add that on the integration with public transport, I think one area we've had real success with engaging rail operators has been purely giving them their own dashboard of data, so they can understand on a daily basis how many people use our system to go to their stations, because they often think that we're in competition, but actually they're seeing that thousands of people are using our bikes every day to get on their trains. And I think, yeah, that's really helped us not only set up kind of like combi tickets, but also get preferential locations outside a train station, because they can see every month, okay, there's done X thousand trips on a Beryl bike has come to these 5 train stations in our network, this is a valuable asset to us, and we should, try to enhance it and promote it.
Thanks, Patrick. We have a question from Marco on sustainability of bike sharing from the point of view of bike and battery movement. So there is this example of Milan with bike sharing vans being parked on the sidewalk while the workers load and unload the bikes. Is there any solution here for a true sustainability of the entire process? Italy might have challenges in terms of urban space. So I see Marion raising her hand. So please, Marion.
Yes, thank you. I think it is a big question when you're looking at how to operate a bike share system, and there's different points you need to look into, especially when you're setting up the contract, whether it's for licenses or a public tender. It depends on SLAs, so service level agreements, how many times a day you need to rebalance certain stations. That can be sometimes an issue. Or it can be also how to set up a sustainable operation, and you can have SLAs or not from the side of the operator. Donkey Republic, for example, we have a lot of ways to rebalance without vans. So we rebalance with trailers linked to powerful e-bikes, for example, to make sure we avoid having too many vans in the city. We also have small vehicles with pedals to rebalance and change the batteries, for example, of our e-bikes. But one thing that I think is quite important is to make sure also you can have a way to repair some bikes on the street. That has been the core DNA of Donkey and how we operate. But that also depends on the contract with the municipalities. That's something that also comes from the public sector. So I think there's not one right answer, but it should be at the core of discussions before preparing documents for licenses or a tender. And also with looking into your team. So for example, most of our mechanics and drivers, they much prefer to work on e-bikes and those that's called Vogue vehicles, so there's pedal vehicles, than driving cars, because you get less annoyed with traffic, you go faster, and also they like biking. So I think there's plenty of options, but if you have a very big system with a lot of rebalancing, there will be some vans on the street as well. So it's never a perfect system.
Tejus, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the question, Marco. I just wanted to add a little bit to that great answer from Marion, particularly around our station-based systems. As I mentioned, we're focusing on station electrification as a way to reduce the operations vehicle miles traveled and driving to various stations to charge or to swap out batteries. So that's one form that we're really looking at to help to decrease that operational footprint. The other aspect that we also offer in some of our markets is a program called Bike Angels, which offers incentives to riders to move bikes to stations that may have lower availability of bikes. So if they take a bike from a high availability station to a low availability station, they earn points that can help to then be used towards getting a free e-bike ride or a free ride in the future of some sort. And so that's another way that we've really been thinking about decreasing the footprint of the operations from a rebalancing perspective. So both the station electrification and then also the Bike Angels have really helped to support that from a sustainable perspective.
Thanks. I will keep you here for just one second, because I saw some questions around the e-bikes, right? And the recent studies done in Europe from governmental agencies in France. We had one last year, I think, or 1 year and a half ago. Show that there is a clear connection between the development of e-bikes and the increase of bike use, right? Because of the increased diversity. So how the increased diversity, so more women using bikes, more people, not really with disabilities, but like having issues with moving around with the usual bike, new demographics. How do you see that, like on a daily basis? They're just like, who are those new people becoming bike riders? Like maybe even like switching away, going away from cars. How do you see that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we conduct a survey we send out to all of our riders and our operated markets to get a better understanding of how they're using the system. So this is what we publish in the Lyft multimodal report. as a result of that, we tag that to our operational data to understand who are some of our riders and what are some of the demographic trends. So as we've looked at that over the past couple of years, we have seen two trends. One, the overall age of riders that use e-bikes tend to be a little bit higher. So that means that we're actually enabling more older riders to take e-bike trips that they wouldn't have taken a pedal bike trip in the past. And then also we really see strong ridership of income eligible riders. And so this is the program that I discussed in terms of the low income ridership program that we have. This past year, I think around 70% of rides taken by income eligible members were on an electric bike, and they take nearly 2 times as many e-bike rides as standard members. And so from a diversity perspective, there's an openness to trying e-bikes from riders that may not have typically seen cycling as a solution and seen cycling as an option. And so they're really seeing e-bikes as a gateway into bike sharing and into learning how to think about cycling as a true mode solution.
Thank you, Marion.
Yes, I wanted to nuance my previous point, and that's very much into what you're saying. I do believe that you have way more acquisition with e-bikes, and that is very true and important. However, you also have, if we're talking sustainability, which we're talking here, pedal bikes are also much more sustainable. So you do need to have hybrid fleets because obviously you don't need to charge pedal bikes. So the whole question about the vans, for example, is much more reduced with the pedal bike fleet that can incorporate, of course, e-bikes. I'm not saying you should not have e-bikes. And also the budget overall, whether it's for the operator or for the city, is much different on e-bike or pedal bike. So I think it needs to be taken into account to have different types of vehicles, depending on your city, depending on the topography, depending on the usage, but maybe not disregard pedal bike all the way, because it's been the bike sharing system for many, many years, several decades, and we do know that it also works. So I just wanted to add some nuance to our point.
I think we all agree on that.
Yeah.
It's all a matter of balance, budget, and final objective to have this. I'm looking at further questions.
Can I just add one piece of information? I think it really builds on both points. Multimodality of the fleet really helps. We are multimodal with scooters, e-bikes as well. And we know that often one mode is the entry point within the shared micromobility sphere. So for example, scooter rides start riding e-bikes as well and vice versa. So multimodality is often an answer to that.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you, Chiara. One anonymous question. Bike sharing has been great when visiting in new cities. One of the concerns I have with cities giving contracts to private companies is the price. Even with memberships, the prices are usually still way more expensive than investing in a personal e-bike. What do municipalities need to do to help make it more affordable for its residents? The answer is public funding, but maybe someone has a different view on that, right? Public bike sharing should be considered as public bike transportation, meaning there is a public investment, meaning it should be affordable for the citizens. I mean, almost no one in Europe pays the full price for a metro, a tram, or a bus ticket. So this would be one element of the answer. Maybe there is another opinion in the room. The way it's funded is a different topic, right? How do you fund it? It's a different question, but like the core element would be the public funding. And if the bike sharing scheme is too expensive, it means it's not a public policy. I'm looking at, we still have 1 minute, so maybe I can take one more question. Let me scroll down the chat box. There are some very, very, very specific questions that we won't be able to answer, so sorry about that. Okay, I'll take the last question I see from Henk. Can we talk a bit more about interoperability, user-friendliness, integration in public transportation, single ticketing and billing system for all modes and operator? This is the Graal, right? And we have 1 minute to crack it. So I don't know who wants to comment on this. So interoperability, mass integration, seamless integration, smoothless journey. We already covered a bit of topics, but if someone wants to add something. seems like we covered.
Just going to
Yes,
say,
Patrick,
yeah, I
please.
mean, we've looked at this in a few cities, I guess, like you were saying, unless the city is funding the bike share element fully, like it's, you know, it's a managed service contract, it's really hard to do the combi ticketing, because if you get a day pass for all travel in your city, if you take 10 trips on an e-bike and no trips on the bus and no trips on the train, how do the different costs get apportioned correctly? So it can only really work where the city takes all the risk on the revenue and owns all the modes, you know, effectively takes a revenue risk, you know, a bit like London, if they're, you know, they've got all the risk on the Oyster card, but if the bike share is brought into that, then essentially you could have a combi ticket. But yeah, it's quite economically challenging to attribute a cost unless you know exactly what someone's done and that. So yeah, that is a that's a hard one to square the circle of, but we have looked at it. But yeah, it's not really taken off anywhere.
Thanks, Patrick. I think it's time to wrap up. I would like to thank each of our speakers for their presentations. It was very insightful, and also everybody for your active participation. So I think that today's discussion really highlighted that bike sharing is much more than just a mobility solution or something nice and trendy. It's a tool that improves public health, reduces emissions, and makes our cities also more livable. I can only encourage you, so our participants, to take the ideas and the examples that were shared today back to your own cities. So implementing bike sharing programs is not without challenges, right? But the benefits are clear and measurable, whether it's reducing car use, improving air quality, making cities more inclusive. We all see that bike sharing can play a very important role in achieving those goals. So again, and I think we've been saying it all along, but bike sharing should be part of public transportation and receive financial support. All right, bike sharing cannot be profitable for a city and have a true impact on the citizens. Right? It's not. I mean, it also it's not possible to have both, right? You need to choose. But so bike sharing needs financial support as public transportation needs. So in this common effort, Cycling Industry Europe will start very soon a study with EIT, which is the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, to measure the environmental and social impact of bike sharing. And we will propose a European-wide approach on what the socio-economic return on investment of €1 spent is. So I think this will help you, cities and local authorities, also to prepare the requirements for your permits, licenses, or public tenders, to really focus on the actual impacts. And you can have this. We can help you measure this impact. So you spend €1, what do you get in return? And this study will be starting this month. Anyway, we are all available to discuss later, face to face, every one of us. Thanks for your engagement, participation, and questions. Thanks again. We all wish you a very nice day, and we hope you go home biking today, if you go home. Thank you.